The galaxy was not at peace. Rumors of war spread faster than light itself, whispered in trading halls, carried through broken radio signals, and carved into the fearful eyes of diplomats. The empires of the stars had fought for centuries, yet this war was different. It was not a fight for territory or resources. It was a war for survival, a war born from pride and old grudges. In the heart of it stood the most powerful empire of all, the Falari Dominion, ruled by a proud royal bloodline of warriors who claimed they had never bent their knees to anyone. At the center of this storm sat Princess Serenia, daughter of the Falari Emperor, seated high upon her throne with silver hair cascading over her shoulders, her sharp golden eyes scanning those who dared to approach her. She was young, beautiful, and fierce, carrying the pride of her people in every word she spoke. She had grown in the shadows of wars and blood, taught that weakness was death, and that her destiny was to marry only one strong enough to defend the crown. To her, humans were little more than a rumor, weak creatures born on a harsh world that bred recklessness more than wisdom. When the council asked about marriage, her voice struck like lightning through the grand hall. "I will marry anyone but the human," she declared, her words echoing across pillars of stone and banners of gold. The courtiers bowed, some in approval, others in unease, but none dared to speak against her. For Serenia's words were not only her own, they were the shield of the Dominion's pride. Yet beyond her palace walls, something was stirring. The war was reaching new front lines, pushing further into unclaimed territories where humans had built their fragile colonies. Unlike the mighty empires, humans had no centuries of war fleets or grand fortresses. They had only their will, their strange stubbornness to survive where no one else dared, and a hunger to carve their place among the stars. No one had expected them to last even a year in the war. And yet, they endured. The first clash came when a Falari fleet descended upon a human outpost expecting a quick victory. What they found was resistance beyond reason. The humans did not fight like disciplined soldiers of empires. They fought like survivors, like predators backed into a corner. Their weapons were crude, their ships smaller, but their tactics were unpredictable. They used asteroids as shields, set fire to their own bases to deny the enemy, and even turned wreckage into weapons. Losses were heavier than the Falari admiral had ever imagined, and whispers of this strange human defiance reached the ears of Serenia herself. The princess listened but did not believe. "Coincidence," she said coldly. "Luck. Nothing more." To her, the humans were insects making noise before being crushed. But deep within her heart, she felt a spark of unease. If luck could be stretched this far, was it still luck? Or was it something else entirely? The next reports only fueled the question. Entire Falari squadrons had gone missing. Battles that should have lasted hours turned into drawn-out sieges. There were even stories of human soldiers fighting through wounds that would have killed any alien warrior. Some claimed they saw a human laugh with broken bones still inside his body. Others swore humans could fight in poisonous air without fear. To the Falari, it was madness. To humans, it was just another day surviving. Princess Serenia stood at her window one night, gazing over the city lit by fires and war banners. She tightened her fists, her ears twitching with irritation. How could such fragile beings resist so long? How could those she had called weak dare to stand against her? People's fleets? She whispered to herself as if to silence the growing question in her own heart. I will never marry a human. Not now, not ever. But far beyond her palace, in the ashes of a ruined battlefield, a lone human soldier wiped blood from his face and looked to the stars. His eyes burned not with fear but with determination. The galaxy had underestimated his kind for the last time. The next months of war carved new scars into the stars. Every empire believed humanity would finally break, yet the opposite happened. The humans did not just survive, they adapted faster than anyone thought possible. Their ships, once mocked as fragile metal shells, were upgraded with stolen technology and salvaged parts from fallen enemies. Their soldiers, once thought too soft, grew harder with every battle, fighting with a fire that seemed impossible to extinguish. Princess Serenia heard every report in the War Council. Admirals, generals, and ministers brought news that always sounded the same. Humans had resisted again. Sometimes they lost whole worlds, but they never surrendered. Sometimes they were outnumbered 10-1, yet somehow inflicted wounds that the Dominion could not ignore. Serenia's pride burned with every word spoken in that council. To her, it was not victory for the humans. It was an insult to her empire's strength. She refused to believe these creatures deserved respect. "They are reckless animals," she told the court. "They win nothing. They only delay the inevitable." But her voice no longer silenced the unease in the room. Some of the older commanders shifted uncomfortably. They had fought countless enemies before, yet no foe had ever fought with such raw desperation. Meanwhile, far from the throne, a single human soldier found himself becoming a symbol. His name was whispered among the survivors of ruined colonies and echoed in the camps of soldiers. He was not the strongest, nor the smartest, but he was something rarer, unbroken. Time and again, he appeared where the battle was darkest. He dragged comrades out of fire, rebuilt weapons from scraps, and stood tall when entire squads had fallen. Where others saw certain death, he saw only another chance to fight. His legend grew in the Dominion too, though in whispers only. Filari soldiers spoke of the death-eyed human, the one who fought like a beast but thought like a commander. Some said he had survived being buried under collapsing walls. Others claimed he faced a Filari champion in single combat and lived. The stories spread faster than the princess could silence them. Serenia's anger grew each day. The more she denied, the more the galaxy seemed eager to test her words. Her father, the Emperor, watched quietly. He had ruled long enough to know that pride could not hold back the tide of war. "Do not underestimate what you hate," he warned her. "Pride blinds even the strongest hunter." Serenia turned away, unwilling to listen. She was no child to be lectured, no weakling to tremble at shadows. But fate cares little for pride. Soon the Dominion suffered a defeat unlike any before. At the outer rim, a human fleet of ragged, mismatched ships had cornered a Filari armada, 3 times their size. The Dominion laughed at the battle before it began, expecting another short fight. Instead, the humans unleashed a storm of strategies no one had seen before. Ships ramming into carriers to disable engines, mines disguised as wreckage drifting into enemy paths, soldiers boarding warships with nothing but stolen rifles. The Aesir, Filari admiral, barely escaped with her life. Half the fleet was lost. The rest limped home, broken and humiliated. The court was silent when the news reached the throne. Serenia's face remained calm, but her heart twisted in fury. For the first time, she understood the danger. Humans were not simply surviving. They were winning in ways her people could not predict. That night, Serenia stood again at her window, her silver hair catching the moonlight. She thought of the human soldier, though she had never seen him. She thought of the fire in their kind that reports could not explain. Her pride screamed at her to hate them, but somewhere deep inside, another voice whispered a truth she refused to accept. Humans were no longer insects. They were becoming something more, something dangerous, something that could not be ignored. And, in the dark silence of her chambers, Serenia clenched her fist and repeated the words that had defined her pride. "I will marry anyone but the human." Yet this time the words did not sound as strong as before. The galaxy began to whisper about humans in ways it never had before. What was once mockery turned into caution, and what was caution slowly became fear. No empire admitted it openly, but many were beginning to study human tactics, trying to understand how a species with so little could achieve so much. For Princess Serenia, the whispers were like poison. Every meeting in the Great Hall was the same. Her admiral spoke of new human victories, her ministers begged for more resources, and her father's silence weighed heavier than any words. Each time she tried to dismiss the reports, her voice carried less certainty. She told herself that pride would carry her people through. But in her private moments, she wondered if pride alone was enough. The turning point came when the Dominion captured prisoners from a human outpost. Unlike others, these humans did not break under chains. They were beaten, starved, threatened with death, yet their eyes held the same stubborn fire. Serenia went to see them herself, her silver hair shining under torchlight as she walked through the cold stone corridors of the prison. She expected to see fear. Instead, she met defiance. One human stood out. He was tall, scarred, with hands that told stories of both creation and destruction. When Serenia's golden eyes met his, he did not bow or tremble. He only stared back, as if she were nothing more than another obstacle to endure. Guards shoved him forward, but his steps were steady. The princess felt her chest tighten, though she told herself it was only anger. "Do you know who stands before you?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut stone. "I know you're another ruler who thinks chains make you strong," the human answered calmly. His words were simple, but they carried weight. The guards struck him for his disrespect, yet his gaze never left hers. Serenia's ears twitched in irritation, but her heart beat faster. She had faced many warriors in her life. None had dared speak to her this way. The council wanted to execute the prisoners to set an example, but Serenia stopped them. She claimed it was strategy, that studying humans alive would yield more than killing them. In truth, she was unsettled. The human's defiance echoed in her thoughts. His words carried no fear, no submission. He looked at her as though she were not untouchable, as though her crown and throne were nothing before him. Days passed, and Serenia found herself returning to the prison more often than she admitted. She questioned him, demanded answers, tried to break his pride with words and presence. Yet every time he gave her nothing but calm replies and eyes that seemed to pierce deeper than any blade. He spoke little of himself, but what he did share left her restless. "We fight because no one else will," he told her once. "The galaxy doesn't give us a place, so we make one." Serenia clenched her fists at those words. She wanted to laugh, to call it foolish. Yet deep inside, she recognized a reflection of her own people's ancient struggles. The Dominion had once been small too, surrounded by enemies, forced to carve out survival with blood and sacrifice. Was that not the same fire that now burned in these humans? Rumors of her visit spread among the court, whispered in shadowed corners. Some feared the princess was becoming too curious. Others thought she was gathering strength to crush the humans once and for all. Serenia herself could not answer why she returned. She told herself it was duty, but the truth was more complicated. Each time she faced the human, something inside her shifted. His presence unsettled her in ways no enemy ever had. He did not look at her with worship, nor with hatred. He looked at her as though they were equals. No courtier, no warrior of her people had ever dared to treat her so. One night, as Serenia left the prison, she looked back over her shoulder. The human soldier sat in the shadows of his cell, calm, unbroken, as though chains meant nothing. For the first time in her life, the princess felt unsure of who truly held power in that room. The days of war dragged on, and the Falari Dominion continued to bleed. Victory no longer came easily, and whispers of human resistance filled every corner of the empire. The court grew restless. Admirals blamed one another, generals demanded more soldiers, and advisors argued over resources. Yet through all the noise, Princess Serenia's thoughts kept returning to the prison deep beneath the palace. The human soldier remained unbroken. No torture, no threats, no isolation could change the fire in his eyes. He ate what little food was given, healed from his wounds slowly, and waited. Serenia could not explain why she returned again and again to face him. She told herself she wanted to study her enemy, to understand their secrets, but she knew it was something more. His defiance scratched at the walls of her pride like a blade. One evening, she entered the cell alone, dismissing the guards outside. The torchlight flickered, painting shadows across the scarred stone. The human looked up as she approached, but said nothing. He did not kneel. He did not speak unless she forced him to. Somehow, that silence provoked her more than insults. "You should fear me," she said. her golden eyes narrowing. "I hold your life in my hands. One word, and you are nothing." "Then speak the word," he answered quietly. "But you won't. Because you want to understand." Her chest tightened at the calm certainty in his voice. She stepped closer, her long white hair flowing behind her like silk. "You think you know me?" she asked sharply. "I don't need to know you," he said. "I see it in your eyes. You've ruled with power your whole life, but now you've met something you can't crush, and it unsettles you." The princess's hand trembled at her side. No one had ever dared speak to her in such a way, not even her father. She wanted to strike him, to silence him with force. But something in his voice stopped her. He wasn't mocking her. He was simply speaking what he believed was true. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint crackle of the torches. Serenia looked at him for a long moment, then turned away before her emotions betrayed her. "You humans are reckless. You throw yourselves into death as if it is a game. That is not strength, that is foolishness." The human tilted his head. "Maybe. But tell me, princess, which is worse? Dying while fighting for something worth living for, or living only to cling to a throne built on fear?" Her heart skipped. His words echoed in her chest long after she left the cell. That night, she lay awake in her chamber, staring at the ceiling. She told herself his words were meaningless, just tricks meant to unsettle her. But deep inside, she could not silence the thought. Were humans truly reckless? Or were they simply free in ways her people had forgotten? The next morning, the court gathered once more. Reports arrived that human forces had destroyed yet another fleet, this time near a Dominion supply line. The council roared with anger and shame. Serenia's father listened in silence, then turned to his daughter. His voice was calm but heavy. "Perhaps, my child, you should see them not only as enemies but as rivals. Underestimating them will end us all." Serenia's pride urged her to deny him, to shout that humans were nothing, but her tongue felt heavy. For the first time, she did not answer with certainty. She thought of the human in the cell, of his unbroken gaze, of the words that haunted her through the night. After the council dismissed, Serenia stood alone in the hall, staring at the banners of her ancestors. They had conquered empires, broken legions, and bent the galaxy to their will. But the humans were different. They refused to bend. They refused to break. For the first time in her life, the princess felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Not hate, not pride, but a quiet, unsettling respect. The Dominion Palace shook with urgency. The war that once seemed distant now reached dangerously close. Human forces had struck supply routes again, crippling the flow of resources, and whispers spread that their daring raids might soon target worlds once thought untouchable. The court was divided, pride clashing with fear, but for Serenia the noise of politics meant little. Her mind remained troubled by a single figure, the human soldier locked in her dungeons. Each time she visited, his presence unsettled her. He spoke with calmness, without chains in his voice, even while chained by iron. He did not ask for freedom. He did not plead for his life. Instead, he questioned hers, piercing her pride in ways no sword could. She hated it, and yet she returned. One morning, the alarm screamed through the city. Human ships had broken through the defense lines and were descending toward the surface, the sky filled with fire, the roar of engines shaking the ground. Serenia rushed to the war chambers, golden eyes flashing with fury. The general spoke of evacuation routes, of defense lines forming across the capital, but chaos was everywhere. Her father, the emperor, remained calm. "The humans are no longer testing us," he said. "They come for us directly." His voice was steady, but even Serenia heard the weight in his words. As the palace shook again, Serenia felt her chest tighten. She was a warrior princess trained to face death without fear, but the scale of the attack was unlike anything she had seen. She moved quickly through the halls, issuing orders, but the thought struck her suddenly. If the city fell, the prisoners would either be slaughtered or escape. Her steps turned toward the dungeons almost without her realizing. The human was waiting, sitting in the dim light of his cell, as if the storm above meant nothing to him. When he saw her, he gave a faint, knowing smile. "So, the war has finally reached your doorstep," he said. Serenya's ears twitched with irritation. "Do not mock me," she snapped, though her voice carried less strength than usual. "I'm not mocking," he replied calmly. "I told you, we fight where we must, and now it seems fate has brought us here." The words cut deeper than she admitted. She stood silent for a moment, then unlocked the cell herself. The guards outside would never believe it. But she knew keeping him locked would be more dangerous than letting him fight. He rose to his feet, tall and scarred but still steady. "You will obey me," Serenya said firmly, pushing pride into her voice. "I release you only because this city must not fall." The human gave a small nod. "Then lead, princess. I'll follow, if your orders make sense." Her golden eyes narrowed. No Falari soldier had ever dared speak to her like that. Yet in that moment, she did not argue. She turned, and together they ran through the trembling halls of the palace. Outside, the city was chaos. Towers burned, streets filled with smoke, and the roar of weapons echoed through the night sky. Human forces had landed in numbers greater than expected, pushing hard into the Dominion capital itself. Serenya fought with skill, her twin blades, cutting through attackers, but even she could not deny the strange rhythm that grew as the human soldier fought beside her. He was unlike her warriors. His strikes were crude yet effective, his movements reckless but sharp, and his eyes burned with something she had rarely seen, a refusal to die. When she faltered for a breath, he stepped forward without hesitation. When he stumbled, she struck, to cover him. In the storm of fire and steel, their movements began to match, not by training but by instinct. For the first time, Serenya felt the strength in what she had denied for so long. Humans were not weak. They were terrifying in their will to survive. When the fighting slowed and the smoke cleared for a moment, she glanced at him. His face was covered in ash and blood, but his eyes still burned with the same calm fire. He met her gaze, steady and unshaken. And though her pride resisted, Serenya felt the words form in her heart, words she could not speak aloud. This human was not beneath her. He was her equal. The city burned for days. The humans had struck harder than anyone expected, and though the Dominion's armies were vast, they were caught unprepared. Fires spread across the capital, turning proud towers into glowing ruins. Every street echoed with the clash of steel and the thunder of weapons. The palace itself, once thought unbreakable, now stood scarred by smoke and falling stone. "Princess," Serenya fought through it all, her twin blades flashing like silver lightning. At her side, the human soldier moved with a rhythm that unsettled her pride. He did not fight like her people, trained in strict forms and discipline. He fought with chaos, every strike improvised, every move designed to survive rather than impress. Yet somehow his chaos worked. Where she defended with precision, he struck with ferocity. Where she advanced with pride, he covered her with reckless courage. As they cut through another wave of soldiers, Serenya's voice finally broke through the noise. "Why do you fight with such madness? You throw away your life with every strike." The human grinned faintly, even as his blade drew another arc through the air. "Because life means nothing if you don't fight for something worth dying for." His words echoed in her chest like a drum. She wanted to deny them, to call them foolish, but deep down she understood. Her ancestors had once fought the same way, when the Dominion was small and fragile, before pride hardened into tradition. Hours passed, battles blending into one another. The palace walls cracked, and commanders fell. Serenya and the human found themselves leading a small band of survivors, Falari soldiers shaken but unwilling to abandon their princess. None of them understood why she had freed the human, but none dared question it as long as he fought like a demon beside her. When night fell, they gathered in the ruins of an old courtyard. The stars above were hidden by smoke, and the air stank of ash. Serenia stood tall, her silver hair dirty with soot, her golden eyes blazing with determination. She looked at the human, who sat quietly sharpening a blade with a broken shard of stone. "You fight as if you were born for war," she said at last. He shook his head slowly. "I wasn't. My people weren't. We never wanted this. But the galaxy gave us no choice, so we became what we had to." Serenia felt her throat tighten. It was not weakness, but something deeper, understanding. For the first time she realized, humans did not fight for conquest like her people. They fought because the universe forced them to, and because they refused to be erased. As silence filled the courtyard, one of her soldiers finally spoke. "Princess, the palace will not hold much longer. We must flee before dawn." Her pride wanted to refuse, to order them to stand and die as warriors. But when she looked at the human again, she saw the truth in his eyes. Survival was not shame. Survival was strength. She gave the order none expected. Retreat. They moved through ruined streets, avoiding patrols and collapsing towers. Serenia kept her blades ready, but it was the human who guided them through paths none of her soldiers would have chosen. He knew how to read fire, how to hear the rhythm of gunfire, how to move unseen through chaos. His instincts saved them again and again, and though her pride resisted, she could not deny the truth. Without him, she and her soldiers would already be dead. When they finally reached the edge of the city, Serenia stopped to catch her breath. The wind carried smoke across the horizon, and behind them the capital glowed red with flames. She clenched her fists, golden eyes burning with fury. "This war should have been ours," she whispered bitterly. The human stood beside her, his voice calm but firm. "Wars don't belong to anyone. They belong to those willing to survive them." For a long moment, Serenia did not answer. She stared at him, at the scarred face that refused to break, at the calm strength that unsettled her pride yet drew her closer. She had declared before her court that she would marry anyone but a human. Yet now, deep inside, she felt the first cracks in those words, because in the ruins of her capital, surrounded by death and fire, it was a human who had kept her alive. The forests outside the capital stretched wide and dark, their trees rising like silent guardians against the smoke-filled sky. Serenia and her small band of soldiers moved carefully under the cover of night, guided by the human soldier who seemed to read the land as easily as others read maps. Every sound, every broken twig, every gust of wind caught his attention. He led them away from patrols and into safer paths, as if the forest itself whispered its secrets to him. Serenia walked close behind him, her golden eyes fixed on his back. Pride told her she was still the leader, the princess of the Dominion, but another voice whispered the truth, that without him she would already be dead. Each step unsettled her more. She had sworn to her people that humans were weak, that she would never bend to one, yet her survival now rested in his hands. They reached a hidden cave near the river and set camp. The soldiers collapsed in exhaustion, but Serenia did not rest. She stood at the mouth of the cave, her twin blades resting against the stone wall, her gaze lost in the shadows of the forest. She could not silence the thoughts clawing inside. The human joined her quietly, carrying a makeshift torch. His face was tired but calm, his eyes steady as always. "You should rest," he said. "A princess does not rest while her people bleed," she answered coldly. He gave a small smile. "Maybe not. But even a princess is still alive only if she breathes." She turned to him sharply, her pride bristling. "You speak as if you know me." "I don't need to," he replied simply. "I see what you are, strong, proud, unyielding. But I also see what you hide. You're afraid, not of death, afraid of being wrong." Her chest tightened, and for a long moment she said nothing. His words dug deeper than any blade because they carried truth. For her entire life she had been told she was the future of her people, the unbreakable heir of the Dominion. To admit doubt would be to betray everything she stood for. And yet, standing here in the darkness, she could not deny it. Finally she spoke. her voice softer than before. You humans fight like you have nothing to lose. But I cannot be reckless. My people look to me. I cannot show weakness. Tiu, human looked at her for a long moment, then set the torch down. Strength isn't never doubting. Strength is choosing to keep standing even when you doubt. That's what we've learned. That's what keeps us alive. The silence between them stretched heavy with unspoken thoughts. Serena's golden eyes met his, and for the first time she felt no desire to look away. There was no worship in his gaze, no fear, no submission. He looked at her as an equal. That unsettled her more than anything else. Yet it also stirred, something she could not name. One of her soldiers stirred in the cave, muttering in his sleep, and the moment passed. Serena turned away quickly, hiding the heat rising in her chest. The next day they moved again, deeper into the wilderness. The war raged behind them, but the small band of survivors had only one goal now, to regroup with the scattered Dominion forces. Along the way, Serena and the human fought side by side again and again, defending one another with instinctive precision. The more they fought together, the more natural it felt. By nightfall, when they camped once more, her soldiers began to whisper. They had noticed how their princess walked close to the human, how her orders often matched his suggestions, how her golden eyes lingered on him longer than they should. None dared speak aloud, but the thought was growing among them. Something was changing. As Serena sat by the fire, the human sat across from her, sharpening a blade. Their eyes met once more in the flickering light, and for a brief moment the world of war and duty faded away. She had declared before the galaxy that she would marry anyone but a human. Yet here, in the quiet of the wilderness, she no longer felt the same certainty. The wilderness carried its own dangers. For days, Serena and her group moved through the forests and rivers, avoiding patrols from both sides. The war had left no place untouched. Villages burned, farmlands turned to ash, and cities reduced to stone and fire. Everywhere they went, they found signs of destruction. Serena felt the weight of it pressing on her shoulders. She was a princess, sworn to protect her people, yet all she saw was ruin. The human soldier, however, never faltered. He carried supplies when others grew weak, patched wounds with scraps, and guided them through the land with instincts no Falari commander possessed. Serena watched him quietly. Each time she saw him push forward, refusing to surrender, something inside her shifted. She hated the thought, yet she could no longer deny it. Without him, she and her soldiers would have fallen. One evening, after leading them safely across a collapsed bridge, the human stopped to drink from the river. Serena approached him, her golden eyes sharp as always, though her voice carried less command than before. "You could have escaped by now," she said. "Why stay with us? Why protect me when I am your enemy?" He looked at her calmly, wiping the water from his face. "Because survival doesn't care about enemies. Out here, either we stand together or we fall alone." His words struck her deeply. Pride urged her to dismiss them, but her heart whispered otherwise. She had been raised to believe her people stood above all others. Yet here she was, alive, only because of the one she swore to despise. That night, as the soldiers slept around the fire, Serena sat apart staring at the stars. The human joined her silently. They said nothing for a long while, only listened to the wind moving through the trees. Finally, Serena spoke, her voice low, almost uncertain. "My father once told me pride is the shield of our people. Without it, we are nothing. But now, I wonder if pride has blinded me instead." The human glanced at her, his face calm, his tone steady. "Pride can keep you standing, but it can also stop you from seeing what's real. The war isn't about thrones or shields anymore. It's about who refuses to give up." Her golden eyes lingered on his face, seeing no fear, no flattery, no submission, only honesty. It made her chest tighten in a way she had never felt before. For the first time, she allowed herself to ask the question that had haunted her since the war began. "Are humans truly as strong as the stories say?" He gave a faint smile. We're not strong because we're fearless. We're strong because we're afraid, and we keep moving anyway. The fire cracked between them, its glow painting their faces with warmth. Serenia looked away quickly, hiding the storm in her chest. She remembered her words spoken before the entire court. I will marry anyone but the human. Back then, they had felt like a vow of power. Now, those same words felt like chains binding her to a lie. The next morning, scouts reported a human battalion moving nearby. Serenia's soldiers prepared for death knowing they were outnumbered. But to their shock, the human soldier stepped forward. I'll go first, he said. If they see me, maybe they'll hold their fire long enough for you to escape. Serenia's chest burned with anger. You would sacrifice yourself for us? For me? He nodded calmly. If that's what it takes. For a moment, Serenia could not speak. She had seen warriors give their lives before, but always for duty, always for pride. This human offered it without throne, without crown, without demand. He offered it freely. Her hand tightened on her blade. For the first time, she realized the war was no longer just about survival. It was about the bond forming between them, a bond she could not admit but could no longer deny. As she looked at him standing ready to face his own people, a thought echoed in her heart. Dangerous, forbidden, yet impossible to silence. Perhaps her vow had already begun to break. The forest was silent as the human soldier stepped out into the clearing. His figure was marked by scars, soot, and the stubborn fire in his eyes. Serenia watched him from the shadows. Her soldiers crouched behind her, tense and afraid. Ahead, the human battalion moved like hunters through the trees, weapons ready. If they discovered the Falari princess among them, there would be no mercy. For a moment, Serenia's chest tightened. She wanted to order him back, to demand he not risk himself, but the words caught in her throat. He walked forward with the same calmness he had carried since the day she met him, as if fear had no place in his heart. The human battalion raised their weapons, shouts breaking the silence. But instead of fighting, the soldier lifted his hands, slowly, and spoke. His words were lost to distance, but his tone carried authority. Serenia narrowed her golden eyes. He was not pleading. He was commanding. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the battalion lowered their weapons. Murmurs rippled through their ranks. Some looked at him in disbelief, others in admiration. Serenia could not hear what was said, but she could see the result. The battalion turned away, melting back into the forest. The human returned, his step steady, his face calm as ever. Serenia's soldiers stared at him as though he were no man at all, but a force of nature. When he reached her side, she asked the question burning inside her. What did you tell them? That I was no deserter, he answered simply. That I fight where survival demands. And today, survival meant protecting you. Serenia's pride trembled. She had been raised to believe loyalty came from oaths, crowns, and fear of punishment. Yet this man offered loyalty freely, without chains. It was a strength her people had long forgotten. The group moved on, traveling deeper into the wild until they reached an abandoned fortress from the early days of the Dominion. Its walls were cracked, its towers broken, but it stood high on the cliffs overlooking the valleys. They set camp inside, knowing it was safer than the open forest. That night, as the soldiers rested, Serenia stood on the battlements, her silver hair flowing in the cold wind. She looked at the ruined stars above, still veiled by smoke from the war. Her heart carried a weight she had never known. She thought of the words she had spoken in her throne room, the vow that defined her pride. I will marry anyone but the human. Yet here she was, alive only because of one. The human joined her, leaning quietly against the stone. He did not speak at first, and the silence between them was strangely comfortable. When he finally did, his words were soft but steady. You don't have to hate us, Serenia. Her golden eyes snapped toward him. No one but her father had ever spoken her name without a title. She should have been furious, yet instead her chest tightened, her voice failing her. You think you know me, she said at last, her tone sharp but weaker than before. I don't need to, he replied. I've seen enough. I've seen the way you fight for your people. I've seen the weight you carry, and I know you're more than your pride. Serenia turned away quickly, hiding the storm in her chest. She was the princess of the Dominion, heir to the throne, bound by duty. She could not allow herself to feel what was rising inside her, and yet, she could not stop it. For the first time, she imagined what it would mean to stand beside this human not as enemies but as something else. The thought was dangerous, forbidden, but it was also undeniable. Below, her soldiers whispered around the fires. They had seen the way their princess looked at the human, and the way he looked at her. None dared to speak it aloud, but the truth was clear to them all. Something had changed between them. As the night deepened, Serenia clenched her fists. Tomorrow, the war would rage on, and duty would demand she return to her people. But in her heart she already knew. Her vow had shattered. Dawn broke over the ruined fortress, painting the sky in faint streaks of red and gold. The war had not ended, but for Serenia, this morning felt like the edge of a decision she could no longer avoid. She stood on the battlements, her blades at her side, her silver hair catching the light of the rising sun. Behind her, her soldiers stirred awake, weary but alive. And among them stood the human soldier, calm as always, scarred but unbroken. News arrived by scouts before midday. The Dominion's capital had held, but barely. The Emperor had survived, though much of the city lay in ruins. Reinforcements were gathering to push back the human fleets, and Serenia was expected to return at once. Duty pulled at her heart, sharp and heavy. She was the princess, heir to the throne. Her people needed her. Yet another weight pressed even, heavier inside her chest, the human beside her. When she entered the hall of the ruined fortress, her soldiers bowed low, their eyes on her. The human did not bow. He never did. He simply stood straight, meeting her gaze as an equal. For a long moment, silence filled the air. Then Serenia spoke, her voice steady, but softer than it had ever been before. You have saved me more times than I can count. You fought where my warriors fell. You endured where others broke. Without you, I would not be alive to face my people. He shrugged faintly. That's what survival demands. Her golden eyes burned into his. No, it was more than survival. You could have left me. You could have chosen your people. But you stayed. The soldiers shifted uneasily, sensing something powerful in her words. Serenia stepped closer, her voice rising. I once swore to my court that I would marry anyone but the human. I believed you weak, beneath us, unworthy of even respect. But I was wrong. Her words echoed off the broken walls, stunning the soldiers into silence. Serenia's chest rose and fell, her pride battling against her heart. She had never admitted weakness before, but today she spoke not as a princess, but as herself. I see now that humans are not weak. You are stronger than any I have ever known. Not because of weapons, not because of crowns, but because of your will. You do not bend. You do not break. You are what my people have forgotten to be. The human said nothing at first. His eyes held hers, steady as always. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet. And what does that mean for you, Serenia? She breathed, deeply, her golden eyes shining with conviction. It means my vow is broken. I will not deny the truth any longer. If my people demand I choose a husband, then I choose not a prince, not a general, not a Falari warrior. I choose you. Gasps filled the hall. Her soldiers stared in shock, unable to believe what they had heard. For the princess of the Dominion to say such words, words that tore against centuries of pride and tradition, was unthinkable. Yet Serenia's voice carried no hesitation. She meant every word. The human's eyes softened, though his face remained calm. He stepped closer, close enough that the firelight reflected in both their eyes. You know what this means, he said quietly. The galaxy will not accept it easily. Then let them try, she answered firmly. For the first time, I will not lead with pride alone. I will lead with truth. The silence that followed was heavy, but it carried a new strength. Serenya's soldiers bowed once more, not only to their princess, but to the bond they had witnessed. Far above, the sun climbed higher, breaking through the smoke-filled sky. The war still raged, battle still waited, but something had changed forever. An alien princess, once blinded by pride, now stood beside a human she had sworn to despise. Together they would face the galaxy not as enemies, but as allies bound by respect. And something far deeper. And though her vow had once been a shield of pride, it was now nothing but dust. Serenya had declared she would marry anyone but the human. Yet in the end, it was the human who had won not only her respect but her heart.